Welcome to the Probate Realtor Show, your one source for selling and buying real estate through trust and probate. Hear directly from the best attorneys and trusted advisors on how executors and administrators navigate the probate process in and out of court. Being a personal representative or successor trustee can be a daunting task, and often beneficiaries don't have a clear plan. Let us help you make the right decision for your clients, your family, and your legacy. And now, here's your host, the probate realtor himself, Matias Baker Masucci.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our show. Today, we are talking to Adrianos Facchetti. Adrianos, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Adrianos is a personal injury attorney who speaks Spanish and Portuguese. And I tell you, he speaks pretty good English as well, based on my conversation with him prior to the show. It's so good to have you, Adriano. So let's dive right into it. This episode is going to be about wrongful death. So let's talk about the very first thing, which, we can educate our audiences. What is wrongful death?
So wrongful death is a situation where, due to the negligence of another person, someone is injured to the point that they actually pass away, that they die. When that happens, the person's family and certain specific categories of people can make an injury claim on behalf of that person. It's not like a normal personal injury case in the sense that it's a very serious matter, but there's different kinds of damages that you can get. And usually, as a lawyer, you're representing the person who has a claim, not the actual person who passed away. So it differs in that respect.
That makes total sense. Now, you mentioned something that interests me. You say the family. What would we consider the beneficiaries? The have a claim, and you said another certain other categories of individuals. What would be like? Who else would possibly have a claim? Like, a domestic partner, I would assume, would have a claim, and the children, obviously, that goes without saying. Do parents have a claim?
So that depends, and it's actually kind of quite complicated. There's a specific statute in California for it, and it differs in different states. But here in California, where I am, the general rule is that the surviving spouse has a claim, as well as the issue, meaning the children. And then if the person has no surviving spouse and no issue, then potentially a surviving parent can make a claim. Uncles, aunts, they cannot make a claim, but typically it's going to be the children or the surviving spouse.
That makes sense. Let me ask you a question. I want to give you an example because, these are scenarios that, believe it or not, are quite common. Somebody hires a nurse to look after their, significant other because they have to go away and they are special needs. They need like certain help. And then as a result of, negligence in certain aspect, that person ends up being injured and passing away. Is that something that this would be qualified as a wrongful death, or is this just more like specific to like the care, like somebody being under somebody else's care?
Basically, the way it works is if you have a healthcare provider that actually causes an injury and they were negligent, then that could potentially be a medical malpractice action.
Okay.
You can have a medical malpractice action that leads to death, and that's also a wrongful death. The most typical situation, though, unfortunately, is when there's a wrongful death as a result of a car accident. That's the most common situation we see, but those things are not mutually exclusive: medical malpractice and wrongful death.
So in the case of a car accident, what is the wrongful, is the claim against the person who was, for instance, driving the other car, or is if somebody had a passenger in the car? Are both scenarios, well, let's say they're intoxicated, they have a passenger in the car, and as a result of a crash, that person dies, would that person be liable of possibly of wrongful death, the driver?
Yeah, so let's say under your hypothetical, you have the driver who's driving drunk, which I've handled that case before, that kind of case. And unfortunately, that's a primary cause of a lot of these wrongful death claims. If the drunk driver causes the death of another individual, then that individual's family and their, the people that are under those categories in the statute can make a claim against the drunk driver. If you have so sometimes you have a passenger that is in the car that survives. So they wouldn't have a wrongful death, or their family would not have a wrongful death claim. They would have a claim directly against the driver. And this is the thing that most people confuse, is you're not making a claim against the insurance company. You're making a claim against the person who actually caused the negligence. And assuming there is a negligence, assuming there is insurance, you're not making a claim against the insurance company, but you're looking to the insurance company to step in and pay. Some people are concerned that we're going to go after a specific individual. They say, hey, I'm not that kind of person. I don't want to go after another person. Well, in our society, we have sort of a social contract. If you broke it, you bought it. You have to take care of the expenses and pay for the loss that you've caused. And, typically, hopefully, there's some insurance and there can be some insurance coverage. Sometimes if the person who caused the negligence doesn't have insurance, obviously they're not going to be very financially stable. So we can also do something called making a claim against uninsured motorist coverage. So if your family member passed away in a case and the person who caused the accident doesn't have insurance, then you can look to your own insurance company to satisfy the claim financially.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's get into a little bit deeper into the damages. In your experience, for a wrongful death case, what type of damages, are sought by the person that needs to be made whole because of the loss?
So I would sort of this is not really what the law says, but I would sort of categorize it for sake of conversation in sort of personal damages, personal loss, and then also financial. So as an example, let's say a child loses their father and the child's 15 years old. Well, there's a financial component to that. So they have a claim and they would have had loss of financial support that they can make a claim for if they were receiving financial assistance from their father. But there's also the personal aspect of it too, which is loss of what they call society and comfort and affection and that relationship that you're losing. And so those are the primary things. You're not making a claim for medical expenses. Okay, that's not something to claim for because the person's passed away. Even medical expenses that they incurred, right up, to the actual situation that happened. But there's also things like funeral expenses and things like that. And those can be thousands of dollars and really ruinous for a family. Some of these burial expenses could cost $10,000.
Right.
So that's what we try to do, is help people get compensation so that they're not stuck with those costs because someone else did something wrong.
That makes sense. Now, what are some of the challenges, both on the plaintiff and defendant side, when proving a wrongful death case?
Oh, there's so many. It just depends on the case. But I would say, number one, you have to show that the person is responsible for the actual accident. They caused the actual accident. And then I would say the second challenge really is fundamental in the sense of it's almost an emotional one. And what I tell people is, look, there's no amount of money that I'm going to be able to get that's going to compensate for this loss. This is, I'm never going to be able to bring them back. All I can do is get you money, and it's not going to be enough. And so there's always that emotional component that can make it difficult, because I have to come alongside and really hold their hand and try to explain to them that, this is the best we can do, and we're going to do the best that we can to try to help you. And so that's a huge challenge. And then beyond that, sometimes there's challenges because you have multiple family members, and money's funny when this happens. Unfortunately, some people will want a bigger share of the pie, and there'll be multiple lawyers involved sometimes because you can't necessarily represent the entire family. Sometimes you can, but there can be conflicts of interest. But just like in probate situations, you can have situations where one family member, one brother, one sister is involved, and that can make it, quite challenging. But these can be very complicated matters. It's not a simple case where an attorney with 2 or 3 years experience would be handling a significant, or they shouldn't be, put it that way, handling a case of this magnitude.
That makes sense. Now, let me ask you, in your experience, how many of these cases are settled, and how many end up going to trial?
I would say just generally speaking, I'd say greater than 90% of cases are resolved without a trial. And in terms of whether a wrongful death case settles, if there is a situation where we can easily prove the defendant was at fault, whether partially or fully, I would say the vast majority of those settle without a trial, probably even greater than 95%. But it, like any good lawyer will tell you, it really depends on specific facts.
Of course, and that makes total sense. Now, if somebody, I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that, and at least, in my career, I've run into this where people are saying, my parents, they died because, somebody did something bad and blah, blah, blah. And then you just talk to them a little bit, just, out of curiosity. And you're like, well, I mean, it doesn't sound like, you would have much of a case. When people come to you, and this is, I guess, a broader question. This is more like a, it's not just related to wrongful death, but I mean, when people come to you and they tell you the facts, how often does it happen to you that you say, look, I mean, for as much as I would like to help you, it doesn't look like you have the ingredients to be successful in a claim. And, I know that as a personal injury attorney, you work on contingency. So, you have to be very frugal with your time, if you will. Because I mean, if you just take any case just for the fun of it, I mean, you could be starving. So how many times, let's bring it back to wrongful death. How many times does somebody come to you and say, look, I have a wrongful death claim. You look at it, you evaluate it, and then, sort of how do you go through the process of determining whether they actually have a case or they don't?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of our core values at our firm is candor, being honest with people. And so I take it very seriously when someone comes to me with any kind of accident case or a wrongful death case, and I want to make sure I analyze the situation very closely and determine whether it meets our firm's specific criteria for acceptance of the case.
Right.
So unfortunately, there are many times where someone comes to us, for example, let's say it's a medical malpractice case, which we don't do anymore, but say they come to us and there's some component of that. And if we find that it doesn't meet the criteria, unfortunately, we're going to say, we really can't help you. Maybe here's another lawyer that you should talk to, and maybe they'll be a good fit. But yeah, we're, like you said, we work on a contingency basis. We don't get paid upfront. And while we do take some challenging cases, I need to make sure that I can actually add value and help the person. If I don't think I can, then I'm not going to do it. When I first started my practice, I handled every single case you could. If it came through the door, I took it. But as
it's the same thing. I swear to God, it's the same thing for real estate agents. It's the
Absolutely.
same. It's like when you just started out and somebody says, "What kind of real estate do you sell?" Anything. You tell whatever, because you don't know any better anyway.
Absolutely. You got that fixer upper that's 150K? I'll do it.
Yeah. Your 5,000 piece of land in San Francisco, sure.
Yeah.
But like you said, you become more discerning, and now you have criteria for your. That's good. Let me ask you another question. What do you think is the most common misconception when it comes to a wrongful death?
I would say more broadly in terms of personal injury, the most common misconception is that everybody's just getting multi-million-dollar settlements every single day. That's not happening. And people just assume that if there's an insurance company, they're going to pay easily and just, you stick your hand out and they'll pay. Let me tell you, I can assure you that does not happen. If you don't have, there's been studies on this by the insurance companies that on average, a lawyer will get you up to 3 times more money than if you do it yourself, right? Because you probably have the same situation when someone calls you and they want to buy a house or something and they decide to do it on their own.
Sure.
And,
oh my God. Yes.
I have that situation all the time. And I just tell them, look, if that's what you want to do, you can go ahead and do it. But, if you hire a lawyer, we're going to be able to, guide you through the process and we're going to get you more money. Like I'll give you a quick example. I had one case where a guy was running a bicycle down a driveway. He got hurt and he tried to negotiate it himself. And he comes to me and says, they offer me like 4K. Can you guarantee me I'll get more? I said, look, I can't guarantee it, but I think that I can, I'll do my best. And we ended up selling that case for $95,000. And he was totally stoked about that. He was happy.
Yeah.
So, it's just one of those situations where you need to sort of make sure you analyze the situation and do what you can for the client.
You know that old adage that says the lawyer, the person who has themselves as a client in court has a fool for a client. Something I'm butchering it. I wish I remembered exactly how it is. But I tell that also to realtors when, I kid you not, I tell that to realtors whenever they're, selling or buying the house. It says you should hire a realtor. When I
Yeah.
bought my house, I didn't represent myself. No way. Don't rep yourself on the if you can help it, And imagine somebody who has no experience in, that's even less, that's even worse, like for sale by owners, or God bless them if they could do it. But what most of the time I see is that they net so much less money. And in your case in particular, it's like, yeah, sure, you're going to take on, progressive insurance by yourself because you're so clever. You stay up at night and read books on trust the professionals, really trust the professionals. So that's a nugget of gold for our audience. But let's get back to the misconception, and that's a good point. Thank you for elaborating on that one. People do feel, oh, I fell at Walmart. I hit my butt on the ground at Walmart. This is going to be like $10 million that Walmart's going to pay me just because they're a big corporation. What you're saying is that, like, no, that's not happening anymore, or that was never happening. But people are listening in the news about the lady who got all the money from McDonald's for the hot coffee, and you know that case, right?
Absolutely.
And they never looked at what she actually looked like. I mean, the photos of the scalding that lady had on her body was, I mean, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but I actually, it's interesting that people just think like, oh, the coffee was too hot. It's hot. It's like, boom, 10 million.
Yeah, I wish it were like that, but it's not. Unless I've had so many cases that are legitimately 7-figure cases, and the insurance company's first offer is like $5,000.
Yeah.
And their whole strategy is sort of the 3Ds. That's what we call it: delay, deny, and defend. And they know that there's a certain percentage of clients and lawyers that need the money so badly, they feel like if they fight, that at some point they'll just give up and not go to trial. And so we do have the situation where, because of what people read about, or because of what they see on social media, or even the worst is, oh, I had a buddy of mine who got a big settlement and it was so easy, or my uncle got a bunch of money and he wasn't even hurt. And I'm like, well, every single case is absolutely different. Every insurance company is different. Every adjuster is different. Honestly, every lawyer is different, and who you have as a lawyer definitely can have a radical impact on how much money you can get. That's the reality.
100% true. And the more I get older and wiser, I like to believe, I have come to realize that, and not lawyers, realtors is the same. Doctors, do not think that all doctors are the same. You could go to 2 doctors and they could tell you completely different things. It's crazy. But I recently had this conversation with a doctor. I was like, but isn't it science? I was like, isn't it like supposed to be? He was like, oh, it's not. So this is interesting. Adrianos, let's talk about you for a second. I mean, how did you get interested in personal injury?
So I started my own practice out from the gate after law school. I was the kind of guy that wasn't going to do great with authority. I'm kind of stubborn. I like doing things in my own way, as my wife would tell you, and my family would tell you. And my dad had his own businesses. My dad was from Argentina. My mom was from Brazil, which basically means I was yelled at in 3 languages. I deserved it. And so I started my own law firm. I had this sort of dream of what I wanted to create for my firm, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And fortunately, I met a mentor who was in his late 70s, this guy who had an amazing attorney, Harvard educated. He had just retired from his firm. And he told me, look, I'll take you on, I'll mentor you. Really, it was an excuse so he didn't have to spend too much time with his wife, I think. And so he took me on, mentored me, and we're doing all kinds of cases. And then one day he said, we're doing a personal injury case. And I said, well, George, I'm not sure. I've never done a personal injury case. He's like, don't worry about it. It's a simple auto accident case, rear end collision, but we were the 4th lawyer. So you can imagine it was not a great case.
Oh, wow.
And so, but we needed the money. So we took the case on, we litigate the case, and the policy limits were $25,000 and they offered $7,500. This was Allstate. So I told George, we should take it. You know, I was counting the money we would get because I was excited because I needed the money. I was very young. And he's like, no, we're going to go to trial. I said, okay, as long as you do everything. So we're sitting there at trial, and this poor guy, he was kind of getting older. And so he couldn't even stand in front of the jury. When he was talking to the jury, he was too tired. And his suit, he had like a bunch of like dandruff on his shoulder. When the jury wasn't looking, I would try to like wipe it off because I was mortified. And so in the middle of the trial, he's too tired. So he starts getting me to do everything. So he's like, all right, tomorrow I want you to cross-examine the medical expert. I said, George, I have no idea what I'm doing. He's like, do it or don't come back. I said, okay, I'm doing it. And so we get to the day of closing arguments and he tells me, you do the closing argument. And I said, okay, I will do it. And then I do the closing argument, and then we're waiting for the jury to come back with the verdict. And I'm sitting in the hallway. And my opponent, the defense counsel, pretty experienced guy, he turns to me and says, you know, Adrianos, I wanted to let you know that that was the best closing argument I've ever seen.
Wow.
I thought the guy, I couldn't believe it. And so I thought maybe the guy was hitting on me or something. I had no clue. And so I said, whatever. We go inside and the jury returns the verdict. And it was amazing. It was $80,000. It was 10 times more than the last offer and more than the policy limits. I couldn't believe it. I was excited. I was stunned. And then my client turns to me. This is the funny part. And she whispers in my ear, she says, congratulations, counselor. You did a great job. But I just didn't have the heart to tell you, the whole time you had your back face to the jury when you were writing on the whiteboard, you had a hole in your back pocket and your rear end was hanging out.
No.
Absolutely true story. True story. And there must be a German word for this, where you feel like humiliation and excitement at the same time. I've never felt this feeling before since. And
oh
so,
my God.
You know what I realized in that moment? I realized, look, I can actually do this. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was sincere with the jury. And I realized that I always thought to be a trial lawyer, a personal injury lawyer, you needed to be slick back hair, you know, and I realized that if you're sincere and you're competent, you're good, and you're genuine with the jury, they're going to trust you. And if you have a legitimate injury with a client that's credible, there's nothing to stop you from getting amazing results. And so that's when I started doing personal injury law, and I love it. On Sunday nights, I'm excited to get into work. My staff just thinks it's crazy, but I love getting into work, trying to help people get a good results, and more importantly, to win for them, to go to bat with.
That's wonderful. And that jury obviously felt like you needed new pens. So
yeah, that's what I didn't tell you. I think I sometimes half joke that they probably thought, give this young guy like a new suit, because the suit looked like it was like it looked like it was my dad's suit or something, because it was too big. But yeah, the problem is that my wallet pokes that part of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, I never forgot. I always check now. If I'm in court, I make sure there's no hole there, because unfortunately, I never want that.
Maybe you should make a hole, because it helped you. It helped that time.
Yeah, go ahead.
So beautiful. I love this story. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for sharing. Before I let you go, Adrianos, let me, so I have a list of 30 questions that are numbered 1 through 30, and I want you to pick a random number, and I will ask you that question, and we'll get to know a little bit more about you.
14.
14. What's your favorite city and why?
Oh, that's easy. My favorite city is London. I lived there during law school for several months, and I enjoyed it so much. I made a bunch of friends. I kind of had my college experience in law school, and I just had a lot of good beer and met a bunch of cool artistic people, people that I'm still friends with. So London for sure.
If anybody goes to London, when they're listening to this, there's a beer that you can't find it over here, and if you can, it's only in a can. It's called Caffrey's. It's kind of like a chestnut kind of a thing. Amazing. There's a pub with a tree. I can't remember the name in London, with a tree inside, and that beer, they serve it over there. So Adrianos, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Time has really flown. We are going to have your contact information in our show notes. For those people who are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
I'd say the best way is just to Google my name and find me on my website, which is fachettilaw.com. If you can't spell it, look at it. It's 2 C's, 2 T's, and you can look at it on the show notes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a great pleasure to have you. And I guess have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.